We are live now, and we are here to chat for the very first Rag Report podcast live on LinkedIn. The Rag Report, if you remember, was a daily bulletin show I created in March. Really, it was a reaction to probably my own fear, if I'm honest. I was sat there thinking, what the hell's going on? I had calls coming out my backside from recruitment owners and clients, and I felt like my podcast, we had a good audience at the time. I felt like it was a way that I could potentially bring news to people. So I went daily every day. It burnt me out. My hair wasn't this grey, Neil, I promise you, at the start of lockdown. But I went live. We got people from all over the world, and it was brilliant. And we tried to share daily news regarding what was going on with COVID. Now, as the first wave sort of slowed down, we went back to our original format of talking more about the market. But we are now faced with this second wave. So I felt like it'd be a really good idea to have you, Neil, the CEO of the REC, on to effectively give us a bit of an update as to where the hell we are as an industry. So Neil, can you give us an introduction, mate, of who you are and what you do?
Neil Carberry, I'm Chief Executive of the REC. The REC is the UK's recruitment industry organisation, 3,300 agency members on the corporate side and 8,000 professionals investing in their CPD through REC Professionals. Its predecessors have been around since 1935, so it's long-standing, but we're doing a lot of modernisation, a certain acceleration of our digital programme over the last 6 to 8 months for obvious reasons. Mm-hmm. I've been at the REC for a couple of years now. Before that, I was at the CBI, which people might know as the cross-industry business body in the UK, but very much working cross-country as well in terms of sitting on the board of the World Employment Confederation, looking at the recruitment industry globally, as well as that sit on the Council of ACAS, which is all about workplace dispute resolution, and Low Pay Commission, which sets the minimum wage, and most importantly, head coach Wallingford Under-10s rugby team.
Yeah, that was the bit that you delivered so well on the first time round, Neil. The bit about the rugby team. But look, it's fair to say you're pretty connected in what's going on around in all areas of the job market. Neil, thanks for taking the time out first and foremost. Right, today we've got about an hour. I want to go through. Really, I want to go through this kind of what actually happened in the first wave. Where are we now, and where do we think we're heading? Right, a logical past, present, future piece. And I think most people watching this and listening back on the show we've all had our own experience of COVID. We all experienced the first wave in our own way. Like, I remember my office. It was a Thursday night. I just recorded 2 episodes of the Rag podcast, Tuesday and Wednesday, and on the Wednesday, I had a guy come into my office, one of my clients, and we were joking about, London's pretty quiet. And then the Thursday I went in, and that night we decided to close the office. We just, temporarily said, don't come in on the Friday, and then we never went back. I was due to be in the office for the first time today, but my train from Manchester to London got cancelled. So I'm coming tonight. And it was insane, the experience I had, and I'm sure everyone else did. But can you give us your take on what went on in the first wave, and how did it actually affect our sector? What were the main headlines that came out of your research?
So if you look at how recruitment goes into recessions, we often say first in, first out, because slowing down on bringing people onto the payroll is a classic client response to a bit of uncertainty. And what we didn't have this time was that slow down. We went in like a train. Yeah. And, particularly hit me hard on the basis that I had been at a World Employment Confederation board meeting on the 10th and 11th of March, and we'd been talking about what was happening in those markets like China that had already shut down in December and were actually starting to come back by that stage, places like Wuhan.
Yeah.
And you could see around the table my other board members from other federations. My Norwegian colleague suddenly looked up and said he was going to have to self-isolate for 2 weeks when he got back from the board meeting. So there was a kind of a sense that things were moving quite fast. And when I got back to London that Friday, we were thinking, like you were, about, well, how do we shut REC HQ down? How do we take things online? But it still felt kind of like a softening of the market.
Yeah.
To take it through to the Monday morning, I think that was the 16th or the 17th of March. That was when it became painfully obvious that whiteboards were just clearing. across the whole industry, perm and temp, with the exceptions of healthcare, but particularly obviously acute and emergency healthcare, not because electives were actually affected the same way as the rest of the market in that they've stopped happening. And logistics, the food chain, where temp work in the food chain dropped a little bit in the first week, went right up as we all bought toilet rolls, and has basically stayed up there.
Have you stocked up this time? Have you got your fridge full of pasta not your fridge, your cupboard's full of pasta this time? Or?
No, I'm not. I'm not a stocker. Although I do have the Carberry vegetable patch out the back, so I'll never go hungry, mate.
You're all right.
I'm all right. Yeah. So you look at that thing about the way the industry went in, yeah. So heavy in March in a way that we'd never seen before. Peak to trough, probably perm in the UK down 80%. Temp down 40-50% maybe. So it really sharply in, and then I think generally people were thinking at that stage, people were asking me, how long is this lockdown? 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks? And at that stage, there was a lot of, it's a bit like World War I being over by Christmas. People were thinking through, how do we get through this and how long is this? And it normalized quite quickly. So what we saw was by no means a V-shaped bounce back, but I think the temp market was starting to get better by the 3rd or 4th week of April.
Really?
Where now it had gone down 40% and it was going up a little bit. So it's not that V. I'm a big, other trainer brands are available. I'm a big fan of the Nike swoosh recovery theory of, when you reopen, things come back quite quickly, but they don't go all the way back and it takes time to recover. Perm really, I think, didn't recover until start recovering at all till late August, September. So the whole market is still below where it was. But in particular, perm is still weaker. What we are seeing is growth in confidence over the summer amongst employers. And of course, the big question now with this second upswing in the virus is how much of that is sustainable. I do think it's more sustainable than you might think, because I see very few businesses who are willing to react this time around the way they reacted first time round. And that's all about, how do we continue to operate rather than thinking this is a short period that we just got to get through.
Yeah, well, no one knew the severity of it back then. I mean, one of my good contacts owns a recruitment company. There's about 350 people, and they didn't have laptops, and they literally had to buy 350 laptops globally. And I mean, there was just a lot of businesses in and outside of recruitment that were not set up for remote work in any way, and it was fine to be that way. Whereas this time round, it feels like we're all, we've all adapted somehow, and there's some sectors are slightly different. Anyone who didn't have to adapt probably won't have to adapt this time, and anyone that does will. The confidence in the hiring piece, though, is big. What you said, regardless of whether business is moving forward and people are just used to doing the job, this next wave, I would imagine people are feeling a little bit less ambitious, if you like, of just pressing play on certain hires. So when you look back then, say up until September, key highlights were, what did you say? Temp and both temp and contract were down, but temp and perm were down, but perm was down
a lot more.
And any specific sectors that surprisingly did better or worse than you would have expected?
So I think IT did better on perm than you'd expect. In fact, we've certainly got REC members where perm did better in IT than temp did. And partly that's clients grasping for resources that they hadn't been able to hire before because they felt the market had changed.
Yeah.
Lots and lots of logical flow through. So the bounce back in temp is much stronger. Clients are one of the senior HR people at GSK said to me recently, we're hiring temp because we can see the demand right now. We can see it's there. We need to respond to it. We can't see 3 to 6 months out because of the path of the virus. And that's a big drive to temp across the whole market. Logistics is way up because, of course, we're buying everything online.
Amazon's just loving life right now.
Yeah, well, and you're talking about recruiters putting 15,000 people into Tesco, similar number into Amazon. But you're also seeing some quite interesting things. One of the things I picked up, we started scraping jobs boards to look at job creation in the UK in July, August time. And then one of the first things that we found was animators was going way up.
Really?
And we thought, right, okay, what's this? And when you look into the subcategorization of animators, web design, elements of web design are covered under animators in the SOC codes. So you see companies investing in the things they need now. And I think that little trend is what we're going to see broadly. And it's the reason why we started to talk about our jobs recovery tracker. So I can sit here and say, week to the 14th to the 20th of September, there were 1.2 million job ads in the British labour market. And I think it's really important that we focus on that. Where
does that stand against what you'd have expected pre-COVID?
Probably about 1.4, 1.45.
Right.
So not miles behind. And the thing is, they're in different places. Yeah. And I think a lot of what we need to focus on as an industry is the British economy is always creating jobs. The thing is, they used to be over here and now they're over there.
Yeah.
So it's it's IT, it's online, it's logistics, not bricks and mortar retail. And by the way, buying your shopping online and getting it delivered takes more people than buying it in the supermarket does. So there's a whole slew of big changes going on. And there's two big challenges there. One, candidates don't know where the job creation is. And two, the opportunities for recruiters are in different sectors in different ways.
Exactly. So what do you do? Do you pivot, or do you? That's the question, isn't it? If you transition of jobs is going to be massive, but how do recruiters effectively impact that and in the same breath support their own or protect their own businesses at the same time?
Well, I think clients really matter in this, don't they? And I was talking at the Agency Expo recently about the two who's that I talked to a lot of recruiters about. Who number one is who's your client, and what I mean by that is, of course, the talent acquisition guys, and you need to know them, and they need to be your allies. But they, with the best will in the world, they don't have a clue right now what their future talent demand is going to be, because it's being written somewhere further up the chain by people with P&L responsibility in the business. So how are you getting as close as possible to the pivot your client is making, and understanding that, and understanding what your client thinks their problem is? Because if you have that relationship with a client, that starts to give you some clues as to where there might be future demand, especially if, for instance, you're a regional recruiter rather than a sectoral specialist. In sectors, you'll see different bits going up and down, and clearly, you're going to need. There are some sectors which are not going to come back to where they were. Bricks and mortar retail will not be the same again. That is a long-term change. By contrast, hospitality, if you hibernate, I think we all think restaurants will still be a thing in 3-4 years' time. So it's about being a bit strategic about what the future of the sector you're serving is, and that's about understanding your client, the way your clients are thinking as well. So getting really close to that, I think, matters. Second bit is that then, how are you resourcing clients? One of the interesting discussions I had with a few recruiters during the lockdown was they were actually finding it quite difficult to have a conversation with the client, because they had one 360 consultant who looked after a client, and that person was on furlough. And actually the relationship had gone with that person. So a lot of recruitment business thinking about, well, yes, you ladder up against the client, you get more senior input, you understand their problems, but on the other side, you also have a bit of a team around the client that's looking at, this is how we're supporting your employer brand, this is how we're shaping the go-to-market, and this is how we're running the process. So those things, we hear a lot of medium to larger firms talking about moving back from 360 to 180 in terms of how they structure things. Those things I think are really interesting as trends in the industry. And then just watch the data, because we're producing loads of data every month now on where the growth is. And you are going to have to be a bit fleet of foot. And actually, it's not just in your own business's interest. It's going to help people as well, because the more recruitment resource we get into supplying these growing sectors and these growing areas, the easier it is to support transition for people who've lost their jobs. I think there's a really bad negative argument out there about rising unemployment that says unemployment's going up, so there are no opportunities out there. There are always opportunities out there. Yeah, it's a question about how you get people to them quickly, and I think it's a really big and important role for recruiters in doing that.
No, I agree. I think there's a couple of major things. I mean, if I look at the conversations I'm having at the moment, well, in general, the types of organizations that are invested in their brand, in their marketing, are those that typically, probably see a bit longer runway. So technology, life science, healthcare, they're the three that we've had the most engagement with. But I think it's been incredible to see how ambitious people have been in this lockdown period, in terms of trying to upskill themselves, learn new techniques. I'm talking about recruiters, in order to give themselves the best platform to come out of this as aggressively and as good as they can. But some of that has actually had a negative impact on the volume of staff they've got, not just due to furlough, but actually some of the budget we spend on that junior talent, we could probably put into our brand that protects or enhances the opportunity for our more senior people. What do you think from your conversations with members? What do you think of this, of the reality of the entry level recruiter? There was a couple of posts I saw yesterday about, are people still hiring juniors into their recruitment organizations? Is the industry gambling on new talent for next year, or are we saying, nah, shut up shop right now? What's your viewpoint on that?
So there's a couple of things there that I think are really interesting. Firstly, what do we think the talent, the skills matrix for a really successful consultant is coming out of this? Because I think it might be a bit different to what it was going in. So, in terms of new talent coming into the industry, I think some of that added value stuff, because we all know that AI and automation is going to take a sweep out of some of the stuff that consultants are doing and free them up to do the added value conversations with candidates, with clients, around the process. And ultimately that's going to be a good thing, because the consultant job will be higher skill and more productive, and hopefully we'll all make more money. So there's an advantage there, but it does mean that the kind of traditional path into the industry is under challenge, because we've had a bit of a and I did this myself at the start of career. It's a bit of a sink or swim. You get on the desk, you get some opportunities, and if you make some money, everybody's happy, and you build up your career from there. I think that even when we're all back together in workplaces, that's going to be different. It's even all the more different when people are working a bit more dispersed, because how do you learn as an entry-level recruiter right now? I mean,
it's so difficult.
It's really, really difficult. And so I do think that how we develop our staff is going to be important. We did some work on the recruitment apprenticeship, and to be honest, it hasn't really flown. It's flown for a few companies who took it really seriously, but the numbers aren't great. And I wonder whether one of the things that will come out of this is we're going to have to think again about kind of the development path for recruiters, because they probably have to reach a different level to be sustainable coming out of this in terms of the conversations they're having with clients.
Well, I spoke to a Rectorec who's got a really strong market presence 2 days ago, and he just said there used to be a home for people. Like, they could find a recruiter with some experience. There was always a home. There was always somewhere to go. Whereas now the standard is just so much higher. People are just not preparing to spend money unless it's like, they've got a certain track record, which means, with that, like you say, the benchmark's going to go up. One interesting observation that everyone's probably thinking about is this whole, do we work in the office or not? The government, pushing, promoting actively in August, September, eat out to help out, get back to the office, trying to get the I understand they're trying to kickstart the economy, but then in the last couple of weeks, the whole, if you can work from home, do it message, which was not clear. I don't think I've watched 3 different videos of Boris after, in the house, talking separately to when he was on stage or whatever, and it wasn't clear. But what are you guys getting questions about, and what are you advising recruiters to do? Because some businesses are really suffering with that separation. They've just got COVID secure, they've got people in the office, and now they're not sure whether they can sustain it.
So we're seeing a lot of members not step back to where they were in March and April, and for good reason, right? For 2 good reasons. One, these offices are now COVID secure. The REC HQ is still open. I will be there tomorrow.
What is COVID secure? Like, what in your opinion? I mean, I'm asking you because I'm not back in the office. I was meant to be there today. I didn't make it, and there's only like one person. But what is the government guideline on COVID security? If you know that.
So you basically just need to think about how people can work mask-free, socially in a socially distanced way. You need to make sure that you've got hand sanitizer and procedures about minimizing interaction, and you've got to really embed office cleaning and hand washing. So if you take the business closest to my heart, the REC HQ, we've got a one-way system in place. We've got hand sanitizers on every bank of desks. We're bringing half of the staff are allowed to come in on any 1 week. We're not requiring anyone to come in yet, so it's really the people who want to come in who are coming in.
Yeah.
And when people come in, they have to wash their hands. They then get allocated a desk. That desk does not have anyone facing them or immediately to their side. So we're lower capacity, but we're open. And I think if you can do that with an office, it's really important to use your space intelligently as a business, because I was talking to Trade Union Congress about this the other week, and they're in the same space, which is, there's lots of young workers who'd actually be better off in the office because they're working on a mum's ironing board or something at home. So if you can be COVID secure, I think most of the recruiters I've been talking to are leaning towards keeping places open. I think we know that there are mental health advantages for staff in having interaction, and we know that there's that it helps with kind of what is a steady state of something that now we know might last well into next spring, rather than being something you go through 2 and 3 weeks. So our advice is you've got to be COVID secure. There's a guide to that on the REC website. You've got once you're COVID secure, you can be open. I think you have to think very carefully about whether you require people to come in under these circumstances. And clearly, it's very different if you've got an office in central London where people have to take the tube to come to work, versus having an office on a business park in Milton Keynes where you've got a car park, because then people are in the safety of their car until they're in a COVID secure place. And the data is really clear on this, right? People are not getting COVID by going to work. People are getting COVID by being close together in university halls of residence, in pubs and in bars and in each other's houses. So really big pushback actually from some pretty senior people in the industry over the last few weeks, and the government's shift back was too broad-based because not everybody works in London.
I'm interrupting this podcast to give you another update from our sponsor, Odro. The team at Odro have launched another feature in summer 2020, and it's going to be a game changer. This is going to massively change the way the recruitment agency market operates globally for the future. They've called it Odro Producer. This platform sits alongside the company's award-winning video interview opportunity and gives you, the recruiter, the ability to create engaging, eye-catching video content ready to share in a matter of minutes. So you can record or upload a video, and then you can add banners, overlays, images, subtitles, logos, so that you can create these eye-catching videos that are built for LinkedIn. So whether you're interviewing, whether you're doing sales messaging, or you're just trying to put out valuable content online, then Odro is no longer just a video interview platform. It's also a content creation platform for recruiters. Get in touch with Odro today to see how you can implement this into your recruitment agency ASAP. Thanks for listening. Let's get back to the show. Well, I mean, I'm in Manchester now, and yesterday the announcement was, I think we're 589 cases per 100,000, which is the highest in the country, which is just crazy. There's an area of Manchester, Fallowfield, which is where the students live, which is 850 in that one town. I mean, it's just nuts. But I mean, I'm not going anywhere, right? I'm just working from home every day. It's becoming, but for me personally, like I think we've all been through waves. I definitely had this kind of euphoric period in May where I was like, this is amazing. Like, fuck the office. I'm never going back. And then now I'm like, I am so sick to death of scheduling conversation with people. Like, and I'm talking about my team, like just 5 minutes here, 5 minutes. It's just so annoying. Like, you just want to,
every 5 minutes chat is a half-hour Zoom call.
Exactly. And it's just so, I just want to grab someone because they're there. And, well, I don't think we'll ever go back 5 days. I've said this loads, but we're definitely going to try and blend some stuff together.
So that I think is the biggest single challenge for employers right now, which is what's this mixed model? Because I don't think any of us are going back. But yeah, I'm with you. I sit in this room for a lot of time, and it occasionally drives me nuts. In my experience of sort of March, April, May, because when the lockdown hits, well, recruitment markets went demand on the REC went like that. Our calls went up 400%, as you'd expect. People scrabbling for the cash flow advice and the the furlough advice that they needed from us. So March, April, May, my experience was living at work, not working at home.
Yeah.
And you need that variation. And what I'm really pleased about is we've moved beyond this period where everyone was writing these awful hot takes about the death of the office.
Yeah.
And we're into a much more sensible debate now, which is what's this mixed model that we're building? Because we're not going back, but
no,
you could do some interesting things.
You can. I mean, I just seen a contact of mine, good friend John Dweck, who was on my first or second ever podcast I did. Owns an agency called Pod Talent. He put an announcement on LinkedIn yesterday saying he's sharing his office with another company now. So they've both got the full home it's a beautiful office in Old Street. I went there last year, and I think they've got 3 days. The new company's got 2 days, but everyone's got their own desk and their own home in this office, and they're splitting the rent. They're paying 60%. They're paying 40%.
Yeah.
Both. It's very smart, very clever. I know WeWork have released this UK-wide pass we're looking into, where you can go to any WeWork in the country now, and for us, I think that'll work really well. So if you were going to look at give us like your overarching synopsis on today, right? Has this huge surge in cases that we've seen in the last 3 to 4 weeks had a factual impact on the labour market and what's going on in the recruitment space right now?
So all of our data has a little bit of a lag, so I'll probably answer for about a week ago.
You haven't got like as of 12 o'clock today. What's going on?
Not. It's not all on the laptop here.
You're letting me down.
But okay, I do think we saw a big recovery in September, as people opened up. I think all of our indicators suggest that we're not going back down in the way that we did in March, although there's the emerging signs of a bit of a plateau.
Yeah.
So I suspect what we'll do is we might hold position for a month or two and then take off again. What's really, really clear is that in certain sectors, temp is going absolutely mental. Right. I've talked to people who are supplying into the food chain who are ahead of last year in terms of the numbers, which is pretty spectacular if you think about the situation that we're in. So I think demand is continuing to pick up gently. I think employers increasingly are thinking about this as a long-term situation, at which point they don't, they just stop recruiting. It ceases to be a good strategy. Yeah. They have to start recruiting for the things they know they're going to need. The one big break that I see out there is the effect of a potential no-deal Brexit on lots of sectors in the economy. Yeah. So I think that is increasingly, if you look at our calls, that's rising in senior recruiters' minds as a potential risk where they're servicing sectors that might be affected. But I think the risk of a big second spike is more of a plateau where we got to in September rather than going back down at the moment. I'm pretty optimistic that the platform of growth that we built over the summer persists, although we're still behind last year. In real recovery, I think you're probably waiting on a sense that we're through the worst of this second wave.
Really? Well, it's interesting because I literally had a call yesterday with I think I had about 65 recruitment owners on 2 calls, and I heard this phrase: "We've had a record month in September and a record quarter."
Yeah,
ever for some businesses. And I was like, really? And they were like, yeah, and I don't know if the stars aligned, loads of backlog from April, May all got pushed and it all fell into September and August. But it was really, really positive to hear, like genuinely positive to hear. And seeing, even in Australia, I've got some people who are in Melbourne that, they're still in lockdown. They've they've had a really tough time of it, but they're still managing to make placements and they're managing to serve their markets. So yeah, I'm hoping that is a positive sign. But what do you see if you're looking into the Q4 of this year? What do you expect to happen?
So I recognise that. I recognise good August, good September. That was pretty true across the market, and in some places, people doing really, really well. And the Melbourne point you make, I talked to Charlie Cameron at the RCSA, our sister Fed over there, quite a lot.
Yeah,
that is a telltale sign for what we'll see here as well, because we're so used to doing everything online now. There's not the kind of switchover costs. I think clients are more comfortable with online now. We won the battle with the Home Office to allow online right to work and stuff like that. So there's all sorts of lower barriers to continuing to recruit as we go back in. So I think, I recognise that picture, which is down fast, slow recovery, April, May, June, July, accelerating August, September, and then maybe flat over October and November while we see what happens. But flat is much higher than we were seeing earlier in the year. I mean, I think that 2021 spring looks like an opportunity-filled market for recruiters. I'll tell you a few reasons why I think that. One, the PE guys are smart, yeah, and there's money in the market for recruitment now, which there hasn't been for 2 or 3 years. So that tells you something about what they see as client businesses pivot to new areas and start to recruit. And we talk about recruitment being first into recession, first out. I think we'll start to see that happen. I think it might happen in some jurisdictions around the world before it happens in the UK.
Yeah.
And I think that's about the uncertainty of what happens Jan 1 with Brexit.
Yeah.
But I think when you get through that, I think next spring feels to me like an accelerating period for the industry if people are in the right sectors. I think temp remains stronger than perm through to then.
Yeah. A final interruption to today's episode to introduce Vincere. Vincere is the all-in-one CRM ATS platform built for the recruitment and staffing industry. Now, I first heard about these guys about a year ago. The amount of prospect recruitment agencies and clients I was working with that were telling me they were moving over to Vincere, I had to look into it. And what I found was a business that had a global reach with multiple offices around the world. So they've got this follow the sun methodology, which allows them to support recruitment businesses wherever you are and be in your time zone. But the technology that they've invested in is becoming a disruptor in the space. More and more recruitment businesses are doing this to give their recruiters a competitive advantage. They broke into the G2 Crowd's momentum grid as a market leader based on their reviews from their customers. So the agencies that are using this platform are raving about it. Now, if you're a RAG listener and you're thinking about changing CRM, or you're a new business looking to launch with a new CRM, then I would get in touch with these guys, because if you mention that you're a RAG listener, they're doing an amazing deal. By visiting www.vincere.io/RAG, you can get an exclusive deal which offers 2 months completely free on a 2-year commitment, or 3 months completely free on a 3-year commitment. This applies to all licenses that you've either signed up for now or that you'll add in the duration of the contract. So get on there and have a look. Finally, if you're listening and you're a recruiter and you're thinking, I want to move into a more of a business development role, and I'd like to keep hold of my recruitment knowledge. Well, these guys are recruiting for a BD person, multiple roles in both Sydney and London right now. So if you've got a strong recruitment background, you want to move into BD and you want to work for a fast moving tech business that's helping people like you right now, then get in touch via their website, because they're hiring today. Back to the show. Just had a question, Neil, come from Chris Redmond, a good contact of mine, saying, can I ask if you feel like the market has become more of a candidate-driven market or a vacancy-driven market? I'll let you answer that first, and then I'll give my take on it as well.
That's a really good question, because usually you'd say a candidate-driven market happens when the labour market's tight, when there isn't a lot of talent around, and then you become a vacancy-driven market when the labour market's loose and there isn't a lot of hiring going on. I think progressively we've been moving to more and more candidate driven, because firms are getting pickier about the talent that they want, because they're pivoting. I think because candidates are also viewing negotiation differently. and that will only accelerate now. So if you think about what the long run is for the labour market, let's just take London as an example, right? First of all, you're going to get some hyper locality, right? I'm sitting here in a market town that isn't in London. It's about an hour and a bit from London.
Yeah.
And you know what? The economy in this town is doing absolutely amazing. There's about 6,500 people who live here who are like me, who never spend any time here normally. And our money's going in here. So you're already seeing town economies doing better, right? Now,
Sure.
second point, if I'm offered a job in London, up until now, I've had to be about, an hour, hour and a half, maybe tops 2 hours away from London to do it. If I only have to go to the office 2 days a week, the commutable range for London goes from Plymouth to Newcastle upon Tyne.
Yeah.
So you've got a very different picture in terms of who the candidates that are in the play are. Secondly, if I get a candidate from Anglesey for that job, do I pay them what I used to pay the guy who did 5 days in London, or can I get away with paying what I do in Anglesey? Probably not. But there's a whole slew of changes in the employment relationship. And I mentioned earlier, I was talking to Paul Novak at TUC later, and he and I see eye to eye on this. We're going to see a period of intense individualization simultaneous to a period of intense collectivization. So there's going to be a whole load of stuff about what fair work is and standards, and government is going to stay interventionist. It's the mindset in government right now is we bailed you guys out, and now we're going to tell you how it's going to be, starting with things like, the single enforcement body and umbrella regulation and all of that. So that's happening at one end. At the other end, individual candidates are going to want to kind of pick off a menu of how I work for you. Now, as recruiters, that's actually a really good opportunity, because people are going to want to work as contractors and temps and in different ways. That gives us some opportunities as career managers for people we know and like and we know we can place. But it also creates this more complex negotiation. If we can get across that, that's quite a big opportunity. So I think candidate-driven is here to stay, even in a high unemployment environment.
Yeah, I think what you've said there is really interesting, and the message I keep getting from all the things you're saying is that it's not necessarily the doom and gloom; it's the change that we got to be prepared for. It's going to change. What I've seen some recruitment agencies, Chris, that have gone from very candidate driven focus to client driven. So they're just desperate for vacancies, and also to get candidates to move has been such a challenge that you can't rely on just finding one good candidate and moving them and trying to move them around. You've got to have the vacancy. You've got to try and get that, whether you've got the exclusivity or whatever, and then you've got to have a wide spread of candidates for roles, because the amount of people that have said in my academy each week that they're getting offers that are not being accepted that normally would be, because people are going, well, hang on a minute, I've been here for 5 years. They protected me through the first wave. That job looks great, but if shit hits the fan in the next 3 months, where am I safer? Where am I going to be protected again? Like it, there's a nervousness not only to hire but to move. So with that creates challenges. Even Siri's just asked me which one. I don't know, Siri. That's the answer to Chris's. We don't know. But let me take that one down.
So there's a really, I think that's a really good observation. So I do a roundtable over Zoom maybe once every 3-4 weeks with the heads of the sort of 16, 17 biggest firms, just to kind of chew the market, chew the fat on where the market is. And that was a big theme of our last discussion last week, which is never mind where the client is, we are struggling to get people to move away from where they are, because in a situation like this, do you stick or do you twist? And people do tend to stick. So there's a real, we talked earlier about the skill set of recruiters, and that's part of the skill set, isn't it? So how do you land this candidate? Because simultaneously we've got this world where online recruitment concertina's everything, so you can go from passive candidate not looking for a job on Monday morning to a job offer on Friday afternoon. But actually the art is getting someone to say yes to that job offer, not to push through the
isn't this might be a bit of a controversial comparison, but it feels a little bit like the dating world when it moved towards, like, Tinder and stuff. So you went from crazy. I'm moving to this, but if we've gone from a world where you used to have to go on a night out and spend 60 quid. I'm just throwing an arbitrary number out. In Sheffield, where I went uni, it was about £9, and in London, it was never 60 quid. But you had to go out just to be out and about, just to have the opportunity to talk to someone. And if that was if you had the confidence to do it, right? Fast forward 2013, 14, when these apps started launching, you could sit in the flat on a Saturday night and be chatting to 8 people for free. And, with that explosion, I mean, I've been out of the game for a long time in that world, but the reality from all the conversations I have with friends that have been single and things, it's brought some major positives. So, the opportunity, a bit like this whole, I've just hired someone in South Africa that would never have happened 6 months ago. The opportunity now to have this global talent pool is massive, just like the opportunity to talk to people on your sofa is massive. But with that becomes, so much choice, so much competition, so much, are the connections as close as they once were? When you sit with someone and you get to know them on a date or in an office and in a face-to-face interview, if you've had to travel, an hour to go to a meeting and dress up and sit in front of an organization and talk about your skill set, you're showing a level of commitment to that process that, flicking on Zoom, I haven't even got trousers on. How many people have interviewed in lockdown with no pants on is going to be incredible. I wish the REC got those kind of stats, but I don't think we can get that. The truth is, it's the level of commitment to just to speak to someone is so much lower than it was, so much lower, which means people are going to reject offers a lot more because they were never as committed to go to the pissing interview as they were 6 months ago when they had to go for it. They had to take a day off work, or it's so much. You've got to weigh up that with this mass opportunity comes a new wave of challenges, just like social media, just like dating apps, just like the new world from COVID.
So, right. This is a kind of core bit of what I do talking to people around the country at the moment, right? Is there is so much nonsense talked about disintermediation where, the technology will do it all for client companies and the industry will be sidelined. People are not paperclips.
No.
They're people. They do unpredictable things and they're driven by their emotions and the stories they tell themselves, not just by the facts of the matter. If people were behave programmatically, you just find out how much someone earned, phone them up, offer them another 5 or 10 grand, and they do it. That's not how this works. We all know that. We know it's a people game. And I think part of the upside for the industry in all this is working out how we get clients to appreciate it's a people game and not a process game. Now, that doesn't mean we don't need to be doing the equivalent of recruitment Tinder in our back office with a tech stack that we're buying, because the tech stack is essential to competing. But the value is the people and the kind of bringing together the parties and understanding precisely the needs of the client. And that I think is a hugely highly skilled professional service. And that actually, if we can access that, fantastic future for the industry.
If you increase the pool of talent we are increasing the opportunities. If you can hire someone in New Zealand, South Africa, wherever, like for a role in the UK or you could travel from Newcastle upon Tyne, let's be honest, the boundaries have been blown away in so many industries.
Yeah.
With that comes a bigger headache for the internal recruiters. It's an even harder job. So in my opinion, as long as recruitment agencies are savvy enough to think how they can build talent pools in multiple regions, how they can actually perform in this digital world, you're gonna see the need for use even higher, in my opinion.
I think that's right.
So Chris has added another question. Thanks for your engagement, Mr. Redmond, as always. How significant is the risk that bigger recruitment companies will find it harder to survive, but that now is potentially a great time to start a smaller recruitment firm with a lean cost base? Good question, Chris. What do you reckon?
So it's definitely a good time to start a recruitment firm with a lean cost base. And, the REC as new members numbers show that plenty of people are doing that at the moment. I think there's if people have a niche and a pathway, I think that's important. I think that bigger recruitment company thing is interesting because I think you only struggle to survive if you lack the resilience. So there are a couple of big questions for recruitment industry owners now. Is one, what's our attitude to gearing the business? Now, in temp, in staffing, you always carry a lot of balance sheet debt because you're carrying debt for wages that clients haven't paid you for yet. But there's also debt that's built up over time in terms of supporting the business. So I suspect we come out of this with bigger recruitment firms thinking a bit differently about their debt portfolio and actually thinking a bit more flexibly about their cost base. Because one of the things that you've got to do is be able to maintain a strong cash runway. And I've seen some fantastic examples of leadership in the industry from big recruitment firm owners working out how to pivot what they do into different fields to make a bit of cash, but also thinking about how they can control costs in the business sensibly. And some of that, some of those involve really difficult decisions about staffing and so forth. But over the long run, I think that kind of adaptability is going to matter. Having mentioned something about Mark Essex, who spoke at our conference recently earlier, the thing that I like most about Mark's attitude to the future is he says, look, stop trying to look around corners at what's coming. Just build up your capacity to be adaptable. And I think that's absolutely right. So if you're running a big recruitment firm, it's, what if my revenue was this next year, this and that? What would I do then? It's kind of 2 steps down the road. And as I said earlier, there is money in the market for recruitment firms now that I'm seeing both from privately held firms and investors and from PE, which suggests that with the right investment proposition, there's equity investment that's ready to go in.
Yeah, I'd see that. I'd say there's no doubt when you're a bigger business, there's going to be challenges with agility that you can't necessarily launch changes as fast. And you've got so many more people's, personalities and teams and structures and lives and families to consider. There's a bigger responsibility on the leaders of big recruitment companies to get it right. And probably a lot more at stake. That being said, I've seen some smaller recruitment businesses that, they've had job flow dry up to the point where it's crippling them. Like they haven't got that diversity in their approach that allows them to say, well, actually, across our organization, if that portfolio drops or that industry is not performing, we're seeing a bit more here. And so everyone will tell you their own unique experience is the hardest because it's all they can see at that point, I think. I do think on the whole, the larger recruitment firms will have to take a bit of a step back. They'll have to cut the grass a little bit to grow again. And I think it's been evident. That leads me into the next question, actually, that I wanted to talk about. So I've seen so many LinkedIn articles and posts about the whole, it's going to be an absolute bloodbath of redundancies coming from the industry. That furlough schemes have actually meant that some recruiters, and I mean, I'm not even just going to say recruiters in business and organizations, but we're talking about the recruitment industry. Some recruitment businesses have probably made a lot of profit, especially if they've got large contractor bases. They've furloughed their staff. They've actually dropped their operational costs, but their contractors are still running. In some instances, will have made more money than they would have pre-COVID. And then, are they going to then step in and chop their staff because the demand isn't where it's at? Have you seen any signs of that? Are you hearing that? Is that happening now? Are people starting to release this wave of redundancies we're expecting across the market?
So I'm not a great fan of the idea of a wave. Because I think what we've had is a sort of steady flow as people make sensible decisions.
It was linked to the furlough scheme. Everyone said once that's over, a lot are just going to cut. They're just going to cut the people that were coming back that they don't necessarily think are strong enough, capable. Do they need them? They got used to working in a small of a shrunk version. That's what I'm referring to.
So I think I think there's been a steady flow. And I think actually the way the furlough scheme's been withdrawn has been quite helpful to that because firms have made decisions at different points. It was definitely the case that a lot of people came back on July 1. It was actually a bit of a challenge internally inside the REC because by that stage it was like a Vietnam War film. Kind of we'd all been through the tunnel with everyone who was still in their business through March, April, May, June, and then in July we got all these Tiggerish people back who'd been on furlough for a few months and just really pleased to get back. I think so. I think actually it was quite a big flow of people back in July, and I think that group probably have been given 3-4 months to kind of work out where the market is and see what they can turn. So I do think I think some of the bigger firms have already made some decisions. I think there'll be more to come. The most important thing is working out kind of how we minimize that with any sector. Some of the work that we're trying to do with the government at the moment through the private sector job support scheme is about creating demand for the industry to meet needs in supporting job transition via the DWP contracts.
Yeah.
And that just keeps people in the industry. And the argument we're making to ministers at the REC is these are people you need because you're going to have a mass transition problem in 2021. So you need to help the industry through this period. And I am you're starting to see some real acknowledgement of that from the government. Mims Davis said to me the other week that the employment recovery doesn't happen without recruitment. And I mean, that's obviously true, but you want government ministers to say stuff like that, don't you? Mm-hmm. So there's an opportunity here to see what we can maintain. I think it's going to be really difficult to envisage any world where there aren't fewer people in the industry this time next year than there were in February. But that's unfortunately the nature of the times. All we can do is try and keep as many people in recruitment as we can.
Yeah, agreed. So that leads us on to what are you actually doing to help right now? So if someone sat listening to this either live on LinkedIn or on the RAG podcast at a later date, and they don't know that much about the REC, but they like what they hear from you as an individual at the top. What are you actually doing now, and why would someone, an independent recruitment owner, get involved and seek support?
So there's basically three things, right? First of all, we're better together in terms of these public debates than we are apart. The REC can talk to your clients in a tone and with a frankness that no single recruitment business can. And we've got 500 client businesses in the Good Recruitment Collective. The same is true of government. So tomorrow morning, I'm on a call with Alok Sharma, the business secretary, and I'm taking the views of REC members directly to the heart of government. Number 10, Department for Business, Home Office, all of that. At a time like this, when government is interfering in our lives and supporting our businesses in a way like never before, the REC membership is a seat at the table on those discussions. It shapes what I say. What the REC says isn't just what I reckon, although sometimes I wish it was. That's the first bit. Second bit is our REC is a great source of data. So we've got deep data on what's going on in the labour markets across the country by sector, by region. That's available to members. But we've also got advice on how to move forward. Big issue at the moment. How do I invoice someone who needs to pay me from Germany on January the 1st? Questions like that. That's what the REC is good for. We've got a fantastic team of lawyers. So every REC member gets free legal advice. The average member saves about 12 times their subscription every year in just using our legal support. We do all your contracts for you, and we keep across all your regulatory requirements. So all of that, it's a keep you safe, keep you well advised, your voice outside the industry to make sure that people know, going back to what we were talking about earlier, that recruitment's a really important part of the British economy. It's 10 times the size of the fishing industry, to pick an industry that's in the news at the moment on Brexit. It's a massive export industry. It's a fantastic sector to work in. A big part of our job is just banging the drum on that. We're just about to launch on a big new piece of work that's talking to 2,000 members of the public, 500 client business chief execs, and the REC membership about the economic and social value that recruitment creates, because we're all about making it clear to everyone that recruitment's a high value service that matters. And that's about kind of representing the industry, but it's also about getting us to a world where we're not a cost that you seek to minimize. We're a service that you try and buy on value, not price. And I think if there's one thing I really want to do in my time at the REC for the industry, I want to get clients' mindset into that space.
Yeah, All right. Well, look, that all makes sense, and I do hope that people watching or listening back do get in touch, Neil, if that's how they
rec.uk.com got a new website. It's really nice.
It's really nice. We'll plug that for you. The rec.uk.com. Guys, Andy Cracknell's asked if this will be shown live or shown at a later date. You'll be able to get the full video on YouTube and the audio on the RAG podcast live on Spotify and Apple. We will be releasing that later this week. We'll put some noise out on LinkedIn about that, Andy. So don't worry, you've got the full recording, both video and audio, coming your way. Does anyone else who's watching have any questions before we wrap this up? Neil, I do appreciate your time. It's funny because we talked about this whole Newcastle upon Tyne, all the way down to Plymouth being commutable for London. If my performance today, getting to the train station and having to do a U-turn straight away because it was cancelled, was anything to go by, it might not be that easy. So it's a shame that I've not been in the Hoxo HQ today, but at least my fear was that I would have been stuck on a train and we wouldn't have been able to have this conversation. And I'm so glad we did. Thanks so much for your time.
It's a pleasure. Look, I understand your transport problems. You're talking to a man who lives just south of Oxford and has a season ticket for a football club in Edinburgh. So,
wow. You know what? It's you won't be going to watch any football live for a while, so you don't have to worry about that one.
Well, exactly. Can watch it. Ironically, my season ticket buys me the right to watch it all at home this season. So it's in some ways it's a bit of a COVID win.
Maybe that's probably one of the highlights. It's been every single Premier League game is on. Even though I'm a Man City fan and it's not the best to watch right now.
Well, it's got a bit better in the last couple of days, hasn't it?
It got a lot better when we watched Liverpool and Man United, let's be honest. But let's see. We've got the international break, which no one needs, and then we'll be back. But Neil, if anyone does want to reach out to you directly, if anyone wants to ask any specific questions, LinkedIn's the best place to get you on here, yeah?
Yeah, LinkedIn, or you hit me up on Twitter. I'm at RECNeil, or by email, it's neil@rec.uk.com.
Brilliant. All right, guys, please do reach out to Neil directly if you need any support. Neil, I want to get you back on in a few months' time. Let's have another wrap up in a quarter or so and see what's moved. Thanks to everyone who's listening live on LinkedIn. It's been an interesting first experience. Whenever I record the RAG through the traditional channels, I've not got one eye open on comments, so it is a bit different, but we'll get there. The plan with the RAG is to start releasing a lot on LinkedIn Live, so we get to people a lot faster in different ways. But like every version of the RAG podcast, guys, I don't charge to do this. I don't want you to pay anything to listen to what we do on a weekly basis. We reached 16,500 downloads last month, so we're getting a lot of people around the world engaging with this show. But the reason we've got so many is because people are doing what I've asked for, and that is to share this with other people. If there's another recruitment owner, another person in your network who is desperate for the information that we've got today and we're coming out with in future, share it with them. It's the only way we've spread around the world. And also, it's like you said, we're stronger together. And my whole point of doing this is to make sure that as a sector, we're not sat in silos with information that could help each other, despite the competition to what we do. We can support each other, and I think it's super important. So,
Sean, that's a really important point. And if I take one lesson from the industry, right? I grew up in the industry. I was a recruiter in the city in the 90s, and everyone's always had the best quarter ever, haven't they?
Mm.
But there's an honesty to the debates between recruiters that I've seen this year at the REC, but also outside the REC, that there's a real sense that we can help each other. And still be competitive. And I think that's great. There's a real maturity about it. So, the kind of work you're doing, thank you for it. I think we need it.
Well, I appreciate that, mate. And I'll be back again next Wednesday with more insights, and we'll get you back in 3 months' time. But guys, thanks so much, and make sure you stay safe, and we'll see you all again soon.